In a silent vault beneath New York City, trillions of dollars move each day, without a single bill ever leaving the room. What began as a symbol of trust has quietly become the most powerful and dangerous weapon on Earth. Can money itself be used to wage war? This is the story of how a simple piece of paper, backed by nothing but belief, turned into the world's ultimate instrument of control. From oil markets to online payments, the US dollar has shaped the global system for nearly 80 years. Today, nearly every country in the world holds dollars in its reserves. When nations trade, save, or borrow, they often do it in US currency, voluntarily or not. But as sanctions, financial freezes, and currency wars rise, that same dominance now holds the power to isolate entire economies overnight. What happens when money itself becomes a weapon? It began in 1944 in a small town called Bretton Woods. Representatives from 44 nations met to rebuild the world after World War II. They agreed the US dollar would anchor the global economy, tied directly to gold. For a while, it worked. Countries trusted the dollar because it was as good as gold. But in 1971, that promise broke. President Richard Nixon ended the dollar's convertibility to gold. From that moment, the dollar was no longer backed by metal, it was backed by faith. Oil replaced gold as the new foundation. In the 1970s, the US struck deals with major oil producers to sell oil only in dollars. The petrodollar was born, locking global trade deeper into America's financial system. Through the 1980s and 1990s, US banks expanded that reach. International loans, global debts, and even foreign savings began revolving around the dollar. By the 2008 financial crisis, the world was so tied to it that when Wall Street fell, the entire planet trembled. Then came a new phase, the dollar as a political tool. After September 11th, financial networks were used to track terror funding and block assets. By 2014, sanctions against Russia marked a turning point, the moment finance became an instrument of power on a global scale. Over the years, thousands of entities have been placed under US sanctions, governments, banks, and individuals. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the United States and its allies froze hundreds of billions of dollars in Russian foreign reserves. For the first time, a major power's national savings were locked out of the global financial system. Global payment networks like SWIFT, though technically neutral, rely heavily on US-based transaction channels. When a nation is cut off, its trade grinds to a halt. Meanwhile, decisions by the US Federal Reserve ripple worldwide. A rise in American interest rates can trigger inflation, recessions, and currency crashes across entire continents. In today's world, the US doesn't always need troops or missiles. Access to the dollar itself can decide who thrives and who collapses. Supporters of this system say it brings order to chaos. They argue that dollar dominance keeps global markets stable and that sanctions enforce international law without war. In their view, financial control saves lives by replacing bombs with bank codes. Critics see it differently. They describe a financial empire disguised as economics, one that rewards allies and punishes rivals. They warn that overusing the dollar as a weapon might backfire, pushing nations to build alternative systems that weaken US influence. What happens when the rest of the world stops playing by dollar rules? For ordinary people, this story is not about charts or treaties, it's about survival. When sanctions hit, prices soar, and banks freeze overnight. Families suddenly can't access savings, buy medicine, or send money abroad. Small businesses lose contracts. Students overseas can't pay tuition. Even those far from conflict feel the ripple. When the US raises interest rates, fuel and food prices rise globally. The invisible hand of the dollar touches everyone, whether they realize it or not. Economists often describe the dollar as the world's operating system. If a country is removed from that system, its economy simply stops running. It's like being disconnected from the internet of money. This gives Washington immense responsibility and immense power. Every sanction, policy, or rate decision can reshape lives across continents. At the same time, new alternatives are quietly emerging. Digital currencies, regional trade blocs, and bilateral deals that bypass the dollar entirely. The dollar still rules, but its unchallenged throne is starting to shake. In the years ahead, three paths lie ahead. The first, the dollar stays dominant, trusted, liquid, and unrivaled. The second, a multipolar world where new currencies and digital systems quietly rise. The third, fragmentation. Nations turning inward, trading only within their own loops. Whichever path unfolds, the world is rethinking the price of relying on one nation's money.